Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a story that has captured the world's attention, a dramatic example of strategy, timing, and modern warfare. We're going to unpack the incident where Ukrainian forces waited for a Russian convoy to enter a critical zone, and then unleashed devastating 300-kilogram TM-62 bombs to destroy a main bridge. This wasn't just a random battlefield encounter, it was the product of preparation, intelligence, and a clear understanding of how to use terrain and engineering in war. What I want to do here is not just retell the event in simple headlines, but really explain how it happened, why it mattered, and what the larger implications are for both Ukraine and Russia in this ongoing conflict. So sit back, because this is going to be a detailed breakdown. To start, let's talk about the basics. The TM-62 is a Soviet-era anti-tank mine, but in this case, Ukrainian forces repurposed and modified it to act more like a demolition charge. Normally, a TM-62 mine weighs around 10 kilograms and is designed to disable or destroy tanks and armored vehicles by blowing off their tracks or damaging their undercarriage. But what the Ukrainians did here was scale things up massively. Instead of using a single mine, they reportedly packed charges equivalent to about 300 kilograms of explosives. This wasn't about stopping a single vehicle, it was about collapsing an entire bridge under the weight of a convoy. That level of force is enough to shatter concrete supports, tear through steel reinforcement, and send heavy vehicles plunging into the water or rubble below. That kind of demolition takes planning, engineering, and coordination. Now, why does a bridge matter so much? In warfare, bridges are lifelines. They're not just pieces of infrastructure, they're arteries of movement. Armies rely on bridges to move supplies, fuel, reinforcements, and heavy equipment like tanks and artillery. If you control or destroy a bridge, you can change the tempo of an entire campaign. In this case, Ukrainian forces identified a main bridge that was going to be used by Russian forces to push forward. The Russians, confident in their convoy movements, approached the area likely assuming they had control or at least security. That's when the trap was sprung. The Ukrainians waited, allowing vehicles to commit to the crossing, and then detonated the explosives, collapsing the bridge and devastating the convoy. The timing is key. Too early and only the front vehicles are damaged, too late and the bulk of the convoy is already across. By choosing the exact right moment, Ukraine maximized destruction and created chaos. Think about the psychological effect here as well. For Russian soldiers, advancing in a convoy requires trust in the road, trust in the engineering, and trust in their commanders. When a bridge suddenly explodes beneath them, that trust is shattered. Panic sets in, confusion spreads, and suddenly a disciplined convoy turns into a scene of wreckage and fear. Vehicles are destroyed, supplies are lost, and survivors scramble to regroup. For Ukrainian forces, it's not just about the physical damage but also about demoralizing the enemy and showing that nowhere is truly safe. This is asymmetric warfare at its sharpest, using precision and intelligence to multiply the effect of a smaller force. Let's also put this in the broader context of the war. Ukraine has been forced to fight creatively because it doesn't have the sheer numbers or equipment advantage that Russia does. Instead, Ukraine relies on mobility, local knowledge, and targeted strikes. Destroying bridges is a classic tactic that goes all the way back through history. In World War II, partisans and resistance fighters often targeted railways and bridges to slow Nazi advances. In Vietnam, similar tactics were used against U.S. supply lines. What makes this particular case interesting is the scale of the charge and the way it was adapted from Soviet-era equipment. It's almost poetic in a way, Ukraine using the very tools of Soviet engineering against Russia, the successor state of the Soviet Union. Now, let's take a closer look at the TM-62 itself. Designed in the 1960s, it's a simple, rugged, and effective anti-tank mine. Normally, you'd bury it just under the soil, and when a heavy vehicle rolls over it, the pressure detonates the charge. The standard explosive filling is around 7 to 8 kilograms of TNT equivalent. What Ukrainian engineers did here was repurpose and combine explosives, stacking or bundling them in such a way that the equivalent force was closer to 300 kilograms. This transforms the mine from a localized weapon into a demolition bomb. To give you a sense of scale, 300 kilograms of TNT is roughly equivalent to the energy released by some of the largest conventional aerial bombs used in World War II. Enough to knock down walls, destroy bunkers, and in this case, bring down a bridge. The ingenuity lies in taking a weapon that was originally intended to disable a single tank and scaling it up to disable an entire convoy route. Let's picture the sequence of events. Imagine a long Russian convoy, dozens of vehicles, moving in column formation. Armored personnel carriers, fuel trucks, supply trucks, maybe some artillery towed along. They approach the bridge. The lead vehicles test the crossing. Ukrainian forces, watching carefully, allow those first few vehicles to enter. They wait, making sure the convoy is committed. The bridge is now carrying significant weight, steel and concrete flexing under the load. At that precise moment, the charges are detonated. There's a thunderous explosion, smoke and dust erupt into the air, and the bridge structure shatters. Vehicles plunge, others are thrown off balance, and the entire convoy grinds to a halt. Survivors are stunned. Communication breaks down. What was a steady advance turns into a disaster zone. The Ukrainians don't even have to fire another shot, the destruction is already done. What's particularly striking is the level of discipline required to execute something like this. It's not easy to hold your nerve and wait while enemy vehicles roll in. There's a temptation to strike early. But timing is everything. This shows that Ukrainian forces had both the patience and the coordination to pull it off. It's a reminder that warfare is not only about firepower but also about brains and nerves. So what does this mean strategically? First, it delays Russian advances. Rebuilding a destroyed bridge isn't quick or easy, especially under fire. Even with engineering units, it can take days or weeks to restore full functionality. That gives Ukraine breathing space. Second, it disrupts supply lines. Armies run on logistics, and if fuel or ammunition can't get through, operations grind to a halt. Third, it forces Russia to divert resources. Engineers, construction materials, and additional security are now tied up protecting and repairing infrastructure instead of pushing forward. Finally, it boosts Ukrainian morale. Every successful ambush, every destroyed convoy, reinforces the narrative that Ukraine is capable, resourceful, and determined. There's also the international angle. Stories like this resonate globally. They're reported in headlines, analyzed by military experts, and shared on social media. They feed into the perception of Ukraine as the underdog standing up to a larger aggressor with skill and creativity. That perception matters because it sustains foreign support, both politically and militarily. Western allies are more likely to continue supplying weapons, intelligence, and financial aid if they see Ukraine using those resources effectively. A dramatic story like the destruction of a bridge with 300-kilogram charges is exactly the kind of narrative that inspires continued solidarity. Now, let's go a little deeper into the military science behind demolishing a bridge. Bridges are designed to withstand enormous loads, thousands of tons of vehicles passing every day. They're reinforced with steel and concrete. To bring one down, you need either sustained bombardment from artillery and airstrikes, or you need to target the structural weak points with precise demolition charges. The Ukrainians clearly understood this. By placing explosives at the right points, likely at the support beams or foundations, they maximize the effect. It's not just about how much explosive you use, but where you put it. A well-placed smaller charge can do more damage than a poorly placed larger one. In this case, the combination of placement and massive explosive weight ensured the bridge collapsed at the exact right moment. It's worth noting that the TM-62 has been used in a variety of creative ways throughout the war. Sometimes Ukrainian forces strap them to drones, turning them into aerial bombs. Other times they're stacked into improvised charges to attack fortifications. This flexibility comes from the mine's simple design. It's basically a metal or plastic casing filled with explosives and fitted with a detonator. That simplicity makes it easy to adapt. And adaptation is the name of the game in modern conflicts, where improvisation often beats raw numbers. So let's step back for a moment and think about the bigger picture of warfare in the 21st century. We often think of high-tech weapons, drones, precision missiles, cyber warfare. But at the same time, old-school methods like mines and demolition charges still play a crucial role. In fact, the combination of old and new is what makes Ukraine's strategy so effective. They'll use drones to scout targets, modern communications to coordinate timing, and then Soviet-era mines to deliver the destructive punch. It's a hybrid approach, blending decades-old hardware with cutting-edge tactics. That adaptability is a big part of why Ukraine has been able to resist for so long against a larger adversary. Now, what about Russia's response? Incidents like this force them to rethink their approach. Convoys become more cautious. Engineers are forced to inspect bridges more carefully. Alternative routes have to be considered, often longer and less efficient. Every extra step slows down the pace of operations. And in war, time is everything. The longer it takes to move troops and supplies, the more chances the opponent has to strike again. This creates a cat-and-mouse dynamic, where Ukraine looks for new opportunities to disrupt, and Russia tries to plug the gaps. From a humanitarian perspective, the destruction of infrastructure is always tragic. Bridges are not just military targets, they're also civilian lifelines. After the war, rebuilding these bridges will be critical for Ukraine's recovery. But during wartime, the priority is survival, and denying the enemy mobility takes precedence. It's a harsh reality, but one that has been part of every major conflict in history. The hope is that, in the long run, these sacrifices will contribute to ending the war sooner. Let's also remember that this wasn't an isolated incident. Ukraine has targeted multiple bridges, ferries, and rail lines throughout the war. The most famous example is probably the attack on the Kerch Bridge, which connects Russia to Crimea. That attack showed Ukraine's ability to strike even the most heavily guarded infrastructure. The use of TM-62 charges on this Convoy bridge is part of that same playbook. Strike where it hurts, disrupt logistics, and force the enemy to spread out their resources. For those of you who follow military strategy, you'll recognize this as part of the concept of maneuver warfare. Instead of head-on battles, the goal is to outmaneuver the enemy, disrupt their supply lines, and create chaos in their rear areas. By destroying a bridge, Ukraine didn't just blow up some concrete, they disrupted the flow of an entire operation. That's maneuver warfare in action. In terms of casualties, while exact numbers are hard to confirm, it's likely that the explosion caused significant vehicle losses and some personnel casualties. But even beyond the physical losses, the strategic impact is larger. A single destroyed convoy can ripple through an entire front line, delaying offensives, straining logistics, and lowering morale. One interesting angle here is the symbolic use of Soviet-era mines against Russian troops. For decades, the Soviet Union stockpiled TM-62s across Eastern Europe. Now, decades later, those same mines are being used by Ukraine, a former Soviet republic, against Russia. It's a powerful reminder of how history turns in circles. The weapons of yesterday become the tools of resistance today. So, what lessons can we take from this? First, that adaptability wins wars. Ukraine took an old weapon and found a new use for it. Second, that timing and patience are as important as firepower. Waiting for the right moment to detonate was what made the attack so effective. Third, that infrastructure is always a critical vulnerability in war. You can have the best tanks and the most soldiers, but if your supply lines are cut, you're stuck. Finally, it shows that morale and perception matter. Every successful strike like this fuels Ukrainian resilience and shapes international opinion. As we move forward, we can expect to see more of these kinds of operations. Ukraine will continue to target logistics, and Russia will continue to try to adapt. It's a constant cycle of action and reaction. But each successful ambush buys Ukraine time, space, and momentum. And in a war where every day matters, that's invaluable. So there you have it. The story of how Ukrainian forces used 300-kilogram TM-62 charges to bring down a bridge and devastate a Russian convoy is more than just a battlefield report. It's a case study in strategy, engineering, and psychological warfare. It shows the importance of timing, the power of adaptability, and the enduring role of infrastructure in conflict. Most of all, it's a reminder that even against a larger adversary, clever tactics can turn the tide of battle. Thank you all for watching and sticking with me through this detailed breakdown. If you found this analysis interesting, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about Ukraine's strategy? Do you see parallels with other wars in history? I'd love to hear your perspectives. And as always, stay tuned for more deep dives into the stories shaping our world today. Until next time, take care and stay informed.